my party has made it to Bazzoxan, and we're going to talk about their first session there. So let's dig in. Alright, welcome back everybody. In our last video, we talked about how we were going to prep for Bazzoxan and pretty much the entirety of Chapter 3, and how I go about laying that out. So if you're interested in that, link up above. Today we're going to talk about what actually happened during our first session in Bazzoxan, and it went pretty well, I feel like. So what went well in this session? I feel like my players' interaction with Question in the Ready Room went really well. I feel like it brought them into the world of Call of the Netherdeep and into Wildmount, into Bazzoxan. Before they've been role-playing and having a good time, but I feel like they were kind of just going through the motions. This interaction, I feel like, really brought them into the world, which was really exciting for me to see. They had a lot of fun role-playing with Question, and they got some of their questions answered about different things that are going on in the world, about the Jewel of Three Prayers. Obviously, Question doesn't have all the answers, but they had a lot of time asking about that, and we'll talk about that maybe a little bit more later on, but I feel like that interaction went really well and did a lot for my players in bringing them into the world. What could be better? I feel like still my combat needs a little bit more spice. I've been watching a lot of Matthew Colville's videos, who basically is like, go DM, it's not that hard, and I completely agree. He's actually the one that got me to give it a go. One of his videos is about action-oriented monsters, and I'll provide a link for that in the description below, but it talks about just varying the way that monsters operate in 5e. So I'm going to try that in our upcoming sessions and see how that goes. Notes from our session. So let's talk about what actually happened. So right as the party went into Bazzoxan, Kent and his compatriot were like, hey, here's Bazzoxan, just let us through to the guards. Immediately, as they enter the place, alarm bells just start going off, and they look off into the distance and they can see these weird shapes with mouths everywhere. Kent and his compatriot say, we're going to go get Taskhand Verin Theylss. You guys help fight these things. We'll be back. So my party immediately rolls initiative, and they take off fighting the Gibbering Mouthers. Gibbering, I don't know how you pronounce it. They go fight them. So on their way away, Kent and his compatriot say, by the way, keep your distance, because the Gibbering Mouthers have some effects that come into play if you're a little bit closer. So this fight was pretty intense for my party. We ended up using all 5 Gibbering Mouthers. It took a toll on some of my players. When you get close, you have to make some saving throws, and they spit, and it was interesting. It took probably close to 10 rounds for my party to finally defeat them. And once one started to drop 1 or 2, then, you know, combat started to speed up a bit. But they've got a decent amount of hit points, and it's really my party's first test at their new level, right? Level 5. So it was kind of fun to see them with some of their new abilities and whatnot, and I feel like they had a good time. The Gibbering Mouthers can pack quite a bit of a punch. So Iris, our warlock, she ended up getting crit by one of the Gibbering Mouthers, and then another one hit her in the same round, and it took her out in one shot. So just as a fair warning, they can pack a punch. The other thing that happened during this fight is I had some guards, I think I had 2 or 3 that were in the fray, and I kept forgetting about them in the initiative order, and I had highlights and all this stuff, and I still kept forgetting because it's just in the heat of battle, there's a lot of things to keep track of. But Dmitri specifically kept nudging the guard next to him and be like, hey, you gonna do anything? And then after combat was resolved, they still just teased this one guard in particular. And it was a lot of fun, provided some roleplay opportunity. I'm glad my players took it that way and weren't like, hey, you idiot, you should be helping us. But it was a lot of fun. During the combat also, Chozen used one of our custom items, which was the Grung Poison. So he just chucked it in one of the mouths, and the Gibbering Mouther failed its save, and they had to spend their entire turn trying to find water. So that was a relief for them. It was in the middle of combat, and it's kind of fun to see them use something out of the ordinary, right? Chozen normally rage hits with a great axe, so it's kind of fun to see that. After the battle ends, and they have these nasty piles of Gibbering Mouther to deal with, and they kind of tease the guard a little bit, then Taskhand Verin Theylss and Kent show up, and they have a quick conversation. He just thanks them for their help. He let them know about basically the temple, is what they've been calling it, Betrayer's Rise, and that monsters escape, and it's a pretty regular thing, which is why the city looks the way it does, and why the citizens are okay with a military presence here. Basically, it's under martial law. The party asked Taskhand Verin Theylss about Avandra and Elixion. He said, if you want questions about Avandra, we have a temple that's kind of been overrun, but you can go check that out, and I've got a friend there named Fogholm. He should be able to answer your questions, and then he had never heard of Elixion. They also asked him about the Jewel of Three Prayers. They didn't actually show it to him, but they just said, hey, have you heard of this? He said, yeah, I've heard of vestiges and relics and those types of things. That's why we have so many scholars and artifact hunters in the city, is to look for things like that. I haven't heard of anything specifically, as they kind of described it to him. I haven't heard anything specifically about that, but you can ask around if you like and see if anybody else has heard of that. He also told them that they could not enter the temple Betrayer's Rise without first proving themselves here in Bazzoxan. In my party, of course, I was kind of expecting this. We're like, hey, we did all of this stuff. We saved Kent and killed the Hezrau. Is that not enough? He said, no, that's not enough. I need you to actually prove yourself. So I've got a few favors I'd hope you can help me with. And the first one is to go talk to Ereldra Hythenos, who is in the ready room. And that's the only inn in town. He kind of pointed them direction. He also told them where a few other things in town were. And he said, if you help Ereldra, I will let you into Betrayer's Rise. So they said, all right, sounds good. Kind of off they went. And my party went and did a little bit of shopping. Nothing super exciting that was bought. Jimmy expressed interest in a better bow, so I'm going to throw that somewhere here in the near future. But other than that, I think it was just like little things that my party bought. Next, they went to the Ready Room, which is the inn in town, and they bought dinner. Iris bought Dmitri a raspberry pie because Dmitri has been searching one ever since they left Jigao. Even in Jigao, Dmitri was searching for a berry pie and could just never find one. Luckily, the patrons at the Ready Room had a berry pie, and Iris basically told the waiter that, this is Dimitri's birthday, just surprise him. So they surprised Dmitri with a raspberry pie, and that was kind of fun. While they were having dinner, Jimmy just looked around the room to see if anyone needed help. And this is just the nature of Jimmy. He's always looking for someone to help. And so I had him roll a perception check. He saw Question. He also saw Eloisia and Ereldra in the Ready Room. It looked like they could possibly need help. So I kind of described them and what was going on with them. And he said, okay, we're expecting Ereldra. Is it easy to tell who it is? Yes, that's obvious who Ereldra is. She's the drow. He said, all right, well, I'm going to go up to this other person. And so this tiefling. And so he went up to this tiefling and he asked, hey, why do you need help? And she's like, what do you mean, why do I need help? You just go around asking people if they need help? Do I look like I need help? And he's like, well, yeah, that's what I do. It's kind of like his thing. Kind of innocent, just almost too innocent. Yeah, she said, well, actually, yeah, I do need some help. A portion of my group led an expedition into Betrayer's Rise, and they haven't returned yet. And he's like, well, why weren't you there with them? If they're part of your expedition, why didn't you go with them? And she's just like, well, Taskhand Verin told me I was too weak to go. So I didn't go. I wasn't able to they wouldn't let me in. And he's like, okay, well, whatever. That's kind of strange, but sure. But in reality, we know that Question is just too scared to enter. And so she hid when the time came for the party to leave, and they just left her after waiting for a little while. So Question kept talking with them about the amazing history around Bazzoxan, and you could just feel it in the air. And they were all like, oh man, this person is crazy. My party was like, this person is crazy. They are straight up in a cult or something. After some more conversation, she's like, well, no, I'm not really in a cult. And, I'm here doing research from the Cobalt Soul, Library of the Cobalt Soul. And she's like, I've got some sketches and things. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Iris specifically was interested in the sketches. And so they showed the sketch. They showed a couple of the sketches in her sketchbook. So there's one that looks like the Emerald Grotto. It's very similar. And they're like, oh, that's weird. Where did you see this? And she's like, oh, I just had some visions after studying. I usually study and do some meditation. And during one of my meditations, I happened to see this. And they're like, oh, that is weird. And then the next page over, she opens up a picture of what Iris is wearing. It looks like the Jewel of Three Prayers, right? But it's in its exalted state. So there's 3 different circles instead of just the one little amulet. And they're like, oh, where did you see this? Same thing, just research and meditation. And then she was able to see this. After they went through a couple pages of Question's sketchbook, they then asked if she had any visions here. And no, none yet, but I'm hopeful. Question then turned to the party and said, would you guys be willing to help me find my missing expedition in the temple, Betrayer's Rise? And they said, yeah, sure, that's not a problem. They're kind of wrapping up the conversation at this point, and Jimmy just offhandedly is like, hey, do you know anything about these guys over here? And points to Eloisia. There's a little group of people I had in the Ready Room, and she said, oh yeah, that is the Consortium of the Vermillion Dream. And if you thought I was a cult, these guys match that to a T almost. And because they chose Question, Eloisia is going to be the one in the Betrayer's Rise that comes and tries to kill them and get the jewel from them, which is, I think, the way it's written in the book. Had it been the other way around, I would have been Question with the rival party. I'm still not 100% sure how I want that to play out, but we'll talk about that when we talk about session prep for Betrayer's Rise. We've got a little bit to think about it, which is good. Question mentioned that they're from the Consortium of the Vermillion Dream, and that they're searching for a substance called ruidium, and it has ties to the moon Ruidus. And they were all like, oh, that's weird. We just had an experience with Ruidus. We're not exactly sure what it meant. Have you heard anything? Because when the moon basically like winks at them or blinks at them, and then they're cursed for 24 hours. And she's like, no, I haven't heard anything yet. After their conversation with Question about Ruidium, they head over to Ereldra. So Ereldra is the result of an encounter that I'm adding from Cat Valkyrie, who's a user on Reddit who came up with this encounter. It's basically like a haunted house inside of Bazzoxan that they go and find some relics and whatnot and try and save this guy who has been possessed. So it'll be a lot of fun, I think. We were hoping to play nearish to Halloween, but just due to scheduling, it's going to be this next week, which is after Halloween, and that's totally okay. It would have been a pretty good fit. So I highly recommend that. I'll provide links for that encounter in the description below. So they had a conversation with Ereldra, who's in tears. She told the party that her father had sent her on an errand to go look for an artifact, and when she got back, she was attacked in her father's house and is worried that something has happened to him. She wasn't able to proceed any further. She is not a warrior. She is a scholar. She went and told the party to go check out the house and clear it of anything and then report back what they find. She also mentioned that my dad is a bit eclectic. He's been around for a long time and has been collecting a lot of relics for me in this area, and just so you know, a lot of the relics are cursed, so be careful what you touch when you get in the house. The party then asked her for a map of the house, and she was kind of able to draw one out for them. So they have a little bit of information going into this place. After they did all of that, they were like, hey, we could invite Question with us to this place and then go tell Taskhand Verin that Question helped, and then we can get Question into Betrayer's Rise with us. Let's go ask her if she wants to do that. So they went and talked to Question, and Question was like, yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to. So they pulled Question along, and Question is going to go with them through the haunted house. I might have Question be scared and just sit in the front. We'll see how that goes. I definitely don't think Question's going to make it into Betrayer's Rise. She's going to find some sort of excuse not to go. That's all that happened. It was a lot of fun. I had a really good time in this last session. I'm really looking forward to what happens with the Hythenos estate. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it, and we'll catch you in the next one.